Okay bro, this is your friend Rayan, and as I promised, I am now going to give you a tutor of JS, but right now I am on Python notebook, so I will first give JS tutorial in a Pythonic way. So let's start our new Python 3.816 console. It's loading. Yeah, here it is. Okay, so let's start how we do it that in Python. Let me make it more close. Yes. So like we defined here before we start our JS tutorial, let's first look at the elements that we have in programming. Like for example, a variable. It can have any value, like it can be a string or a variable variable can also have an integer value, or it can also have 1.2 value. These are the floats we call in Python, and it can also have a value like true or false, like true, let's say. And like we can just access them by just typing their name, like here it is true. And there are other structures, like there are functions which we define as def functions name, def name, and then this is the argument 1 and then argument 2, and the remaining args we do this like this, args, star args, like whatever arguments the user is going to add after it, they are going to be stored in a tuple or a list called args. And then we start our body, and then we can do anything we have to do it in it, and then by a preceding hash we take the comment, etc, etc. Like this doesn't even have something, so we just added hash comment, and if it has to return something, so we will say return like this. Now it is perfect. And when we will make it like name 1, 2, and then the rest args, it is just going to return whatever the return statement was. The next thing is that we have arrays, which we call as list in Python, but those lists are actually arrays in Python. Like list is equals to this. It can have any value like 1, a string like s, a, or any true or false value. It can be mixed, or even it can have another list. And similarly, there are, let's name it array, because in JavaScript these things are, a list is called an array, function is function, everything is same, but the list is called an array. We make that in mind. And another thing is that we have a dict, which we call as like this. It is actually defined within braces, and it stores a set of key value pairs like 1 colon a, or it can also have a 2 colon d, or d colon true, or true mapped to false. It can have any values, and via that we can access it accordingly. Now one thing again, that this dict in JavaScript is actually called an object. So let's name this thing as an object, and here we go. Oops, oh sorry, I left something. This is not a comma, this is going to be a colon. Yeah, now it is right. Now if we try to access something from the object, we can access it like this. Object like true, of course it was false, and object d was something like true. Yeah, as you can see it's here. So, and another thing that we have are if else, which you are good at. If x is, if 1 equals 1, 1 equals 2, print 3. That print statement is used for giving the output, and then and else if is actually called elif in Python. Elif 2 equals 2, Print is for returning output. Print 4, which is now a string, not an int, remember. And else statement, if nothing is there, it does not need a condition. Print none. Oh yeah, we have one thing like that too. None. It is a none type. It means nothing. Like it print 4 because 2 is equals 2. It might have print none if it was none of the things above. And we can also import libraries, but we can't do that thing in JS currently, so we are not gonna take that thing that much. So let's check out the remaining part, that is loops. For example, if I have to loop over a list for, I would just give a variable, that is I. This is the loop iteration variable for I in, and then I'm gonna give a sequence. It can be a list or so-called array in JS. For I in print I, as you can see 1 2 3 4, it printed all thing. Or if I make it as A B C D E F and then gonna print I, then I will get all these alphabetic values. It can have any sequence, anything you can iterate on. And similarly is the while loop, which takes a condition, which sometimes you can give a while true or while x equals x. Here x is nothing, so it will give an error. While a equals a. We don't need braces in Python, but we need that thing in other languages. It's gonna do something like print. Let's write that in its body. Print hi, and then we can also pass a break statement if 1 equals 1, or let's make it like 1 if true, break. And let's run it. It just sent hi, and after sending hi, the true loop and it breaked. So let's check out what we learned. A variables is like that, var true, and then there's a function that starts with def, and you can add any, and then there are arrays and then objects, and these lists are called arrays in JS. This is an object in JS, and this is D, and this is. Now let's do that thing in JavaScript. Let me open my console. Yeah, here we go. For defining a function in JavaScript, instead of saying def, we actually make it via function, and then function name, like we did back there, and then the same arg1, then arg2. And for the remaining args, instead of writing star args, we actually do that in JS. We add a ... args. That's the same thing. And instead of writing colon, we have to enclose our things within braces. And instead of print cannot work in JS. What works is console.log. Hi. And the same thing is, we have to just terminate everything with a semicolon, but you cannot, it's optional. And then say return, the same thing we did back there, and let's terminate the function. And if I call as num 1, 2, 3, 4, similarly hi, and then it returned this thing. If I say x is equals to name, then 1, 2, 3, 4, just hi, and x, the value of x is this. And the second thing is loops. The same, the if statements are the same, like if x equals x. The thing is that you have to enclose the condition within braces. This thing will give an error. You have to write that like this. And the same thing, without colons, you have to say it as, let's make it 1 equals 1, and you have to write console dot log, and then this, and finally, because 1 equals 1, it logged this thing which you actually cannot see. It's like this. And the true value in JS is actually true. The false is also lowercase. False. Sorry, not floss. False. And instead of for I in range 5, we write it like this: for I of A, B, C, D. And then the loop console.log I, and here and you can actually like I said, you have to define variables like var x is equals to 3. This is how we define variables in JavaScript. var x equals to 3, and here if I call x, as you can see, the value will be 3. X's value is 3. Now let's clear our console by finding a new function, console.clear, and everything cleared. You can also define variables like using let x is equals to 4 or 4.4 x, as you can see 4.4, but it is not necessary. You can also define it like we do in Python, x is equals to 4.4, and here we go, it's 4.4. If you like, there is another keyword that is called as const. That is for if you don't want your variables to change their value. For const is equals to Ryan, and let's add a semicolon, which is also optional, but you can also add it, you can also remove it, but let's add it. Sorry, const y, what happened? Oh, y is actually there. Const a is equals to Ryan, and if I see a, it's a normal variable, but the point is that you cannot change it. Like a is equals to Ajay, it gave an error because it was a constant. A will only have Ryan value. Even if I assign a Ryan again, it will again give an error because its value is Ryan. Yeah, that's kind of crazy though. And like I said, arrays, an array is 1, 2, 3, and can also store a string. It can also have floating point numbers. It can also have true or false, and even that none. That none is in JS is actually called as null. Here you can see action, and the type of, and to loop over this thing, we have a for loop. For remember, you cannot make it like let this. You have to enclose them within brackets, and let I. You can also remove that I, but this is how we define variables in JS. You can also make it like for I of array, and then console.log, which is an equivalent print statement, and then just end it. But because it's a variable, let's make it like let I, or you can also make it var I, but let's make it let I, and here we go. As you can see, 1, 2, 3, everything is printed, even the null. Just like null, there's another thing called undefined. Undefined is also much like null, but it works in a kind of different way. And the thing that I called about as object, let's clear our console, it's full. Console.clear. And then another thing is object, let's say it ob. And this is the most widely and the most wild thing in JS. Everything you see in JS, even the arrays, even the functions, everything is actually an object. 1, 2, 3. You cannot do it like this. It's the same as Python dict. 2. It can also have true, man, girl, and true, false, anything else, anything you can have it. Oh, sorry, wait. What happened? Yeah, in JS I just left a comma. Now it's it. As you can see, this is the JS, and one thing is that instead of writing like object, you can also define things like, wait, instead of writing that in colons, in the keys section you can also write it as man. Yeah, that would be the same. As you can see here, again the same output, but if you make it like remove this thing from here, that will give an error, as you can see. So the value cannot, if it's a string, then it needs to be within quotes, but if it is a string, it can also be without quotes in the keys section. Another thing, like if I make it like something, hey, and let's make it 3, and oh yeah, here's the error. That thing needs to be in quotes. Shit. Let's try. Even if I make it like, yeah, instead of accessing like this in Python or in like this man like we do in Python, we can also access it as object dot man. Object.man is actually same as object man, as you can see. And let's clear our console again. And like the while loop, that is the mostly left, while true, you cannot write like this. Everything needs to be within parentheses in JS. True console.log hi, and like the thing I did back then, if true break, that thing is in JS too. You can also have semicolons in the end, which is actually the convention, but you don't need to. And here, the same result as we had in Python. Like where were we? The same thing. Now everything is done except something that like we do in Python for getting the type of something. For example, type 2 is actually, it's a string, but type 2 is an int like we have here in Python, and type 2.2 it is a float, and type true it's bool, and the lastly type none is none type. Here are the types that we have in Python mostly. This thing is called a list or something like that, and similarly for getting that type in JS is actually type of. Type of 1 is a number, as you can see the output. Type of 1.1 is also a number, but type of this is actually a string, and type of true is, as you can see here, boolean. Type of false is also boolean, and type of none, which actually is null in Python, is object, nothing else. Here JavaScript has a different construct.